Hey guys, welcome to my channel, which is going to be all about Web 3.0. So I got started in Web 3.0 a little while ago when I was hearing and reading about things like cryptocurrencies and NFTs and blockchains. And I realized pretty quickly that I didn't really know all that much about it. So I got stuck into it. I started reading, I started looking at videos online, doing a couple of courses. And I realized pretty quickly that as I got into the practicalities of it and started trying to do things, that I felt pretty much like an idiot because things were quite technical, quite difficult to figure out. While there were videos out there, it's a space where you don't know who you can trust and what you can trust. So it's quite intimidating. And I realized that there's probably a few other people out there like me who may not have the technical background to understand everything that's going on in the Web 3.0 space, but like me, I've probably heard about things like cryptocurrencies and NFTs and are quite keen to learn more about it. So I set up this channel with a view to providing somewhat basic information for people who are just beginning and entering the space like me. And I'm inviting you all to join me and learn with me about Web 3.0 as I put these videos out in future. So in this post, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what Web 3.0 is. But before we can talk about Web 3.0, we should probably talk about Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. Before we get there, here's today's trivia. So have a listen to this sound and see if you can identify it. Now, if you said that was a dial-up modem, then you were 100% correct. And I remember the days when I used to steal the telephone line out of the phone, connect it into the dial-up modem so I could sit and surf the internet back in the day. Now, if you had a dial-up modem, then you're very familiar with Web 1.0. What were the other things that characterized Web 1.0? The browsers back then were Netscape and Alta Vista, if you remember those, before Google. And really, the bottom line is, Web 1.0 was all about presenting static information to us as users. So we logged onto a web page, looked for something, maybe you wanted to know what the population of China was, did a search on Netscape, found a web page that gave you a whole lot of static information about China. Thinking about it differently, Web 1.0 was basically taking the encyclopedias that you might have been using back in the day, like Britannica, World Book, and putting them online. So you could access all of that information and more at your fingertips through the internet. Web 1.0 probably lasted from the early 90s to the late 90s or the early 2000s, and wasn't really all that interesting if you think about what we have at our disposal today. Let's move on to Web 2.0. So Web 2.0 didn't really change or tinker too much with the back end of the internet in terms of technically how the internet operated and worked. It was still a whole lot of computers connected to each other and talking to each other with lots of centralized storage of information. But where Web 2.0 did change was the look and the feel of the internet. So if you think about the pages and what they looked like, they were a lot more exciting, a lot more inviting. And most importantly, Web 2.0 became an internet of platforms. So when I talk about platforms, what do I mean? I'm talking about Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Platforms where the internet became not only about consuming information or consuming static information, but a very dynamic internet where we as users produced the content that made these platforms interesting. Can you imagine a YouTube or an Instagram without any of the content that we produce as users? So it became a platform internet where users were consumers of the information on platforms, but also the creators of information on platforms, but defined by very big centralized stores of data. So if you think about Google, Amazon, Facebook, all big centralized stores of data. And by anyone's reckoning, Web 2 probably lasted from the early 2000s till about 5 or 6 years ago, which is probably 2016 or 2017. Moving on to Web 3.0, if you remember what I said about Web 2.0, or the difference between Web 1.0 and Web 2.0 was the change in the front end of the web. It didn't really change too much about what happened in the back end. When we start talking about Web 3.0, we start talking about a change in the back end functionality of the web. And the most important thing you need to understand or think about, and you'll hear a lot more about this as we go along, is that the fundamental thing that Web 3.0 is trying to achieve is decentralization. And you'll understand in more detail as we go along why decentralization is so important. But that is the fundamental shift from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. It's the technical way in which the internet is operating in the back end, or the technical functioning of it. And that is a move away to decentralization. And the technology that allows us to do that, the building block of a decentralized internet, is blockchains. And we'll learn much more about blockchains in future videos because it's quite a complex topic. The last thing that I'm going to say about Web 3.0 is that it's quite polarizing. So there are those people out there who believe it's going to be the next frontier in the internet. It's going to change the way the world operates. It's going to bring access to financial services to people who never had it. It's going to bring and restore data sovereignty to users. All these weird and wonderful things which many, many people are hoping for. And on the other end, there are quite a few people who believe it's a total farce. NFTs and cryptocurrencies are massive speculative bubbles that are all going to blow up, and that Web3 is really going nowhere, and in a couple of years' time it's going to fall over totally. You can decide for yourself what you believe. Personally, I think it's quite exciting. I think it has a huge potential. There are lots of things that can still be exploited. It's still very early days, but I think it's something that everyone should be learning about, and I hope you're going to join me on the learning journey here. One of the things that I find most intimidating about Web 3.0 is that I don't really understand the lingo. So when I talk to people, they use acronyms or terms which I'm not familiar with, and that can be quite disempowering or intimidating. So what I decided to do was share with you one term at the end of each video, and that's going to be the nurse first vernacular. So here's today's term. Today's term is crypto winter. Now, for those of you who have been involved in financial markets before or read about financial markets, you would have heard the term bear markets, where bear markets refer to periods in the market where assets are not doing really well, people are getting poor returns, people are panicking, there's lots of selling, people get nervous, all those things, generally a negative environment for markets. In the crypto world, the exact same conditions are referred to as a crypto winter instead of a bear market. So when the price of cryptocurrencies is falling, when people are getting nervous and panicked, there's lots of selling, returns are poor, that's referred to as a crypto winter. It's July 2022, and I can tell you for sure we are in the middle of a crypto winter. Guys, thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. See you next time for a more in-depth discussion on blockchains.